Russia claims. The leadership of the Israeli Air Force announced at a briefing yesterday, July 14th, that during the rocket war, a term used by BulgarianMilitary.com in the 11-day conflict between Israel and Gaza in May this year, an Israeli F-15 was hit by a rocket. The Israeli military does not say when the incident occurred, but confirms the following: at one point in the conflict, the Iron Dome interceptor rocket did not recognize an Israeli F-15 and blocked. It accepts the F-15 as an enemy rocket and begins to pursue the fighter. The Israeli military, which operated the Iron Dome in question, discovered this rocket error and managed to detonate it shortly before it hit the fighter. Thus, the F-15 was damaged by rocket shrapnel as a result of the explosion. The rocket used by the Iron Dome is called Tamir. An anti-aircraft battery includes radar and a rocket launcher. Israel is famous for its very well-developed systems that successfully recognize friend or foe in the air. For this reason, the airspace over Israel was not closed during the conflict, and trade flights continued. Israel has confirmed that it is launching an investigation into the incident, which miraculously did not lead to the destruction of its fighter jet. This investigation is important because it will aim to establish why the friend-enemy system did not recognize the Israeli F-15. At the same time, Russian media are beginning to claim that it is not Israel that is to blame for the destruction of the Israeli F-15, but the Syrian army. Their logic is as follows: for a Tamir rocket from the Iron Dome to fail to recognize who is a friend or an enemy, this means that there must be powerful electronic jamming at the time of the incident. i.e., to select its F-15, the missile had a suppressed signal and information exchange. The Russians claim that there has been such electronic suppression, and for this reason, the Syrian military has decided to attack the Israeli fighter, confident that they will succeed in their endeavor. There is no confirmed information, either from Israel or Syria, that a Syrian rocket was the cause of the damage to the Israeli F-15. However, during the fighting between Israel and Gaza, Tel Aviv officially confirmed that at one point in the conflict, 3 rockets were fired from Syrian territory. They are believed to have been transported with hundreds of others from Iran to involve Tehran informally in the conflict. The shelling of Israeli territory from Syria took place between May 14th to 15th, right in the middle of the conflict.
Hey, do you want a free Trump Gold Bar? Well, stay on the video and you'll find out how you can claim your very own $50 Trump Gold Bar for free. This is our best-selling Trump Bar, and we're giving it away for free until we run out. No hidden charges, no recurring charges, nothing. Just pay the shipping.
Thanks for tuning in. The U.S. Air Force is raiding all over after major trigger point. While we speak about all this, hot chicken and turkey necks, Greece is banning these individuals from bars, theaters, they say through August. But if you go and look at the videos, massive amounts of people was hit in the streets over this issue. And just as all this is happening, China has pretty much let out a huge threat, which is a trigger point in this scenario. And we just wanted to say, as you see Greece doing that, as you see China doing that, how long until the U.S. is pretty much doing the same thing? That's the question you have to ask. But deeper down into the story, as Oregon says they may use National Guard to go door to door, we're going to get into this situation right now that I'm talking about. Thanks for tuning in. So we're going to tell you and show you where they're actually preparing at for this situation. Chinese Communist Party officials share viral video urging nuclear strikes on Japan. And so just recently, after this just came out, right after they put this video out, the Air Force started pretty much getting ready on a lot of levels. I'll show you that. And it says, when we liberate Japan, if Japan declares, even if it only deploys one soldier, one plane, or one ship, Taiwan name and say, we will not only return, but we will start a full-scale war against Japan. We will use nuclear bombs first. We'll use nuclear bombs continuously until Japan declares unconditional, pretty much until they submit. Because they basically said, we won't strike first. That's what China said. And Russia said it too. We won't strike first. But they're saying basically if Japan goes in and try to protect Taiwan, which this would be a major point of escalation, and also this would be a point where U.S. would either have to get involved big time or not. But if they would fall back on that note, they would completely abandon their allies. So with this being said, I'm going to go into this next piece of information here that pretty much shows you the situation aligning up all itself. Even when remember Hawaii, they were saying Japanese people were saying, hey, the Japanese official, they might just hit Japan. I mean, not just hit Japan, but they might just hit Hawaii. And so basically, soon as this was said, I'll show you what the ramp up is. The grid scenario, all this stuff. And Biden already sold the grid to the Chinese. Some guy just got arrested for trying to export parts of ships and stuff like that to the Chinese. Combat ready U.S. Air Force sent dozens of F-22 Raptor fighter jets to the Pacific in powerful message as tensions with China escalate. And F-22 Raptors obviously can hit you with electronic warfare. They can drop the bombs. They can ground strike. They can do all that situations. And it says the U.S. Air Force set to send dozens of F-22 Raptor fighter jets to the Pacific as tension with China escalate. Around 25 of the aircraft will head to Guam and Tinian Islands later this month in what experts say is a powerful message to the communist nation. So again, all the scenarios are lining up as we see it. Now speaking on the other part of the situation, Hawaii as well.
Hi, we are Woodruff.
It makes you want to move.
Oh my God!
Our products let you feel sound through haptic.
And F-22 Raptors from Alaska and Hawaii to fly in large number for China-focused exercise in Western Pacific. So along the Western Pacific, this is another area where they're pretty much preparing in that situation. I'll read you some of the information here. Anyway, Hawaii Air National Guard F-22s are deploying to an exercise in the Western Pacific that includes a large number, about 25 of the stealth fighters from Hawaii and Alaska that are a key part of the kick down the door force for any possible conflict with China. Pacific Iron 2021 will focus on deploying, sustaining air power from smaller and dispersed bases on Guam and Tinian Island in the Northern Mariana Islands. Includes about 10 F-15E Strike Eagles, 2 C-13-0J cargo aircraft. Pacific Air Force said Monday. I said aircraft. We got some aircraft out here for you. We're going to use some aircraft on them. Retired Air Force Lieutenant General Fig Leaf. Anyway, they got that in. It just sounds weird. Fig Leaf. Anyway, a former deputy commander of U.S. Pacific Command and now managing director of security consultancy said he is not aware of previous exercise utilizing F-22s in such numbers. I am not in the Defense Department anymore, so I have no insight into who's messaging whom specifically. Leaf said. Man, what's going on, Leaf? Tell the truth. But anyway, what I would say is if I'm in China, I'd pay attention to the message whether it's intended for them or not, because this capability both in the aircraft and F-22 flexibility, nature of the U.S. Air Force, it goes back to World War I. And this is pretty much the trigger point, you can say. Satellite images show China has deployed military planes to South China Sea. We'll play a little bit of this. Aircraft deployed from islands in the widely disputed South China Sea, indicating that China has taken residence and established military operations there. The images were obtained by Navy intelligence officer of Johns Hopkins University. So again, they're posturing in that position. It says the most significant change in military posture in 2021 is the appearance of Chinese special mission aircraft and helicopters at Subi Mischief Reefs. So this is one of the areas where they're pretty much getting set up, because obviously that would be a strategic point for them as well. And so again, we're just pretty much following this information as it goes. But the big thing is that this is the longest though. Study talking while they enslave their own people with the social credit system, just like pretty much is what's trying to happen here. And again, this is the same scenario you see all over. Oh, we're going to go to war, but first we need to enslave you, and then we can go to war, and then we can have our global dominance. Does Japan control the trigger of the U.S. nuclear war against China? That is the big question here. This is a trigger point. This is a U.S. ally. And so if that happened, this would be them trying to take Japan. It would be them trying to take Taiwan. It would be them trying to get Hawaii. And so again, this is all a strategic plan. That's why Hawaii and all of them are getting ready with all the planes and buzzing them out. So it's very pretty much strategic scenario that they're pushing. I just wanted to update on it. Crazy times, remember. The global plan is to what? Put us under the social credit system, how the people compliant. While all of it goes on, we go through a whole shift of this so-called new world while global system resets and changes. So remember, it's always important to get what you need to survive, items you need, and to be spiritually aware, to be conscious, to also put into every single day, every ounce of decency and energy and time to remember what you need for yourself and your family. Highly important. If you missed it, it was called Nanomagnetic Human Invasion Proof, where I talk about they have this powder they're going to put out like Smart does with 6G, and they said it's a whole new dimension they want to hit us with, and that's the whole plan, to assemble the nano human, basically, to assemble the nano pretty much technology as we go through all these coming events, because they want to actually control the human consciousness, and that's what we've been seeing. So thanks for tuning in. This is Live Report, and it'll be those videos on the right over there I'm talking about. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Hey folks, Eric Stackelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. Some major news on the Israeli military front this week. Israeli media outlets are reporting that the Israel Defense Forces have requested an increase in military funding from the new Israeli government in preparation for a possible military strike against Iran's nuclear program. That's number one. Number two, Israel's Defense Minister Benny Gantz, the former chief of staff for the Israel Defense Forces, gave a speech this week in which he said, and he implored, I should say, the new Israeli government led by Naftali Bennett to assist the Israel Defense Forces in maintaining military superiority in the region. Gantz specifically called out the looming threat of Iran's nuclear weapons program and said, look, we need to be able to counter a nuclear Iran and prevent a nuclear Iran under any circumstances. A third nugget to keep in mind this week, right here on U.S. soil, an Iranian-American journalist living in New York City was targeted in a plot devised by the Iranian regime. Basically, Iranian agents planned to kidnap this U.S. citizen on American soil and bring her back to Iran, and God knows what would have happened to her there. Jailed, tortured, killed, God forbid, but that was the plan devised by the Iranian regime, again, on U.S. soil. So some major developments going on right now vis-a-vis that Iran threat. I talked about all of this yesterday on a live stream right here on the Watchman Newscast on our YouTube channel. We do these live streams, folks, every 2 weeks or so. I encourage you to join. They are 1 hour long. It's a give and take. You bring your questions and I answer them. It's a lot of fun, and it is really, we get really in-depth in the live stream. Again, it is an hour long. Here's a chunk from yesterday's live stream talking about Iran's nuclear weapons program, and even more importantly, how Israel, under no circumstances, will allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon. Take a look. Because as all of this is going on, and I'm talking about kidnapping plots of U.S. citizens on U.S. soil, I'm talking about Iran instigating a war between Hamas and Israel back in May, with Iran pushing the agenda and Hamas thanking Iran afterwards for its support. I'm talking about Iranian-backed Shia militias bombarding U.S. personnel, U.S. soldiers in Iraq on a practically daily basis with rockets and attack drones. So all of that is going on, yet the Biden White House still is at the negotiating table with the Iranian regime, negotiating indirectly with the regime in Vienna, Austria, as we speak. What will it take for the Biden administration to walk away from these nuclear talks with the Iranian regime? You're trying to kill our soldiers in Iraq. You just started a major war in the Middle East. You're plotting to kidnap U.S. citizens on American soil. When does the Biden White House say, enough is enough, and we're walking away and we're done with trying to re-enter this disastrous Iran nuclear deal? Folks, I don't think they're going to do that. because they are hell-bent on re-entering that disastrous, insane deal. They called this plot to kidnap the U.S. citizen despicable and said all the right things, and yet still, they are there in Vienna right now looking to give away the farm, looking to award the Iranian regime for bad behavior and reward the regime with billions of dollars potentially in sanctions relief, basically throwing the Iranian mullahs a lifeline. Hey, they're on the ropes right now. Their backs were against the wall under President Trump, who enforced tough sanctions that work, who took out Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian terror master. President Trump, who enforced tough sanctions that work, who took out Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian terror master. All of that is happening, and it pushes the Iranian regime further into a corner. And then along comes the Biden administration with the lifeline and says, hey, we want to get back in the deal and give you billions of dollars in sanctions relief. Iran's feeling pretty good about itself right now, right? So upside down thinking in the foreign policy realm. I did an interview today on Iraqi TV. It was interesting. I had someone translating when I spoke, and the host continued to ask me about the possibility of Iran acquiring nuclear weapons and will Israel allow them? And I said several times, no, Israel will not allow them. And he said, he asked me, what about the Biden White House? President Biden said recently, on his watch, Iran will not go nuclear. Well, guess what? He may actually be right, because if the U.S. through no good deed of his own, he may end up being right. Let me make that clear. Because if the U.S. re-enters that disastrous Iran nuclear deal, folks, remember, there's the sunset clause in the deal. What does that mean? Well, when the sun sets, when the deal ends, the deal's over. Once the deal ends, whether it's 5 years from now, 10 years from now, Iran's free to do whatever it wants. Now, by that time, Biden will be out of office. So yeah, Joe, you kick the can down the road, potentially. Yeah, not on your watch, but on the next president's watch, because you kicked the can down the road. You gift wrapped this deal to the Iranian regime. You gave them all the leverage when we really, in America, have all the leverage with the Iranian regime. So yeah, in a roundabout way, perhaps they didn't go nuclear on your watch, but really they did, because you guaranteed an Iranian bomb, because you signed this disastrous Iran deal. That's hypothetical, and I made this point today on Iraqi TV, because if this deal happens, Israel will be even more, I don't know if the word's inspired, but motivated to strike Iran's nuclear facilities. Today, we just have reports out of Israeli media that Israel is looking to expand its military budget, in particular for a potential strike against Iran's nuclear facilities. But you can trust what Israeli leaders are saying about Iran going nuclear. And how do you know that? Because no matter where they are on the political spectrum, generally they all agree on this. It's not just the former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, it's the new Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, it's other political figures in Israel, Lapid, Gantz. All of them are saying, no nuclear Iran, we can't live with it. It's an existential threat for the state of Israel. And they're right. What does that mean? Israel will not allow Iran to acquire the bomb under any circumstances, folks. And this Iranian nuclear deal guarantees that Iran will get the bomb. Oh, it might head it off for a few years. Iran might slow down their activities and downscale a little bit for 8 to 10 years. But then the sun sets and the deal's over. And according to recent reports, Iran may be just a few months from breaking out and having the bomb. Hey, folks, the Iranian regime is in no rush here. They're not in a hurry. They'll wait. They're playing the long game. They'll wait 20, 30 years if they have to get the bomb. But I can tell you that Israel will not allow it. It's not going to happen. The deal, it might happen, that we might have a revived Iran nuclear deal, and reports are saying that Iran now wants to wait till Ibrahim Raisi, that brand new elected, quote unquote, Iranian president, takes office next month in August. And that makes sense, because now they're really negotiating from a hard line stance. And if the Biden White House, at all costs, is determined to re-enter that Iran nuclear deal, then it's going to be a pretty sweet deal for Iran. Because as we just laid out, it seems that no matter how bad and how dastardly Iran's behavior is, the Biden White House is still there, and they're not going anywhere. And they're saying, please, 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 let's just do a deal. So let's keep an eye on this, because in a good business negotiation, both sides get something, right? They get something out of the deal. The United States literally got nothing out of the Iran nuclear deal in 2015. There's not one thing I can name that we got other than, we kicked the can down the road for a few years and just delayed the inevitable, Iran breaking out and getting a bomb. Literally nothing. John Kerry, the foreign policy genius, I'm kidding, did not even put forward a demand to the Iranian regime that its ballistic missile program be on the table in those talks, that its support for terror in the region be on the table. Folks, can you imagine doing a negotiation with Iran and not demanding that they give up their sponsorship for Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis and the militias and all the rest? But no, that was not even on the table. And the ballistic missile program, which is probably the biggest ballistic missile program in the Middle East right now, including intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs for short, that can be mounted with a nuclear warhead. I wonder why Iran would want that capability. Those intercontinental ballistic missiles are not for Israel, the Saudis, are not even for Europe ultimately. They are for the great Satan, in Iran's words, the United States.
Folks, I encourage you to check out that entire live stream. It's in our archives here